I am Graham, a trucker who reads a lot of books. My goal is to be a full-time author and illustrator. You're helping me get there by watching this video, so thanks. Now on to the video. Before we get into today's book, let's talk about writing accountability. I don't think I mentioned it on the video yesterday, but I've been working every night on something. The other night I started laying out the timeline for the Thanksgiving book, and I'm really going to try to get it out next year. We'll see what shape it takes. But last night and another night this week, I took some time just working on Intrepid's #1. I've got a name for it, but we'll just go with Intrepid's #1 in case it changes. And it's coming along a lot better. And I figured, well, why don't I talk about the genesis of this book, as well as the book today can be the one that kind of set me off down this path writing this series. In 2013, when I was still very new, I wasn't quite on my training run, but I was still doing my first 30K with my long haul carrier. I was listening to a bunch of audiobooks, and that summer, like, one of the things that I was really concerned with as a truck driver was getting good at backing and blindside turning, and that's all a matter of spatial perception, of being able to track what's around you and know where it is to safely reduce the number of times that you've got to get out and look when you're moving and you got stuff in your blind spots, like if you're parking in a tight space or docking and what have you. And I became really focused on this idea of, like, man, I wish I just had like perfect 360 degree perception of what's there, because I could get this done a lot quicker and a lot more safely instead of having to get out into the truck and just develop that sense. And then that summer, one of the books that I listened to that came out, I can never remember the names of these authors, but I'll put the cover on the thumbnail. It's called The Law of Superheroes, and it was co-written by two guys who grew up as comic book fans and then went on to law school, and they put those two things together and said, what if we examined legal questions that could pop up in a comic book setting, specifically like a Marvel and DC superhero setting? And so they cooked up, I can't even remember how many, but there are at least a dozen chapters in this thing where they propose different ideas and say, okay, well, if you're going to follow the rules of being a superhero, can you do X, Y, and Z? For example, it's a problem for Superman to capture Lex Luthor in the middle of a huge plot and drag him in front of the cops and say, hey, arrest this man. Because within 5 minutes, Lex Luthor would be free, because Superman isn't an officer of the state, an agent of the state, and he's not authorized to carry out arrests. And if he were, he would be extremely limited in what he could get away with legally, because then he would have to play by the same rules as police officers and other agents of the state. For example, that's one case. Another case is Spider-Man. In the comics, a couple of times he's been in court and he's been on the witness stand as Spider-Man. You can't do that, because if you're bearing witness or testimony against a defendants in the United States have the right to face their accuser. And so he would have to be sworn in and identified, and he wouldn't be able to do that under his alter ego of Spider-Man. And if he doesn't want to reveal his identity, then he's shafted. These are just a couple of examples. I think one of them was really cool, was whether Bruce Wayne or Batman could patent his technology. Could he patent the Batmobile? What legal problems would that raise? So as all of these ideas were unfolding and they were examining big superhero problems as far as the law was concerned, I started cooking up this idea that had mashed up with another idea that I had at the time. Keep in mind, this was 2013. Superhero stuff wasn't as tired out as it is now. But I had this idea for like a general superhero world, and I thought I could work some of these legal ideas into it to tell really compelling stories. In the last 3 years, I've also started consuming legal analysis as entertainment, so that adds another layer of intrigue to it. But I've mostly moved off of the idea of having these stories be law heavy. The law will still have a role to play, but I don't want to write Matlock with superheroes, I'd rather tell the story that I've settled on since then. I don't want to get too much into it. There's a rule that, like, you don't talk too much about the idea, you just write the idea down. But since then, I've refined it, and I've been working on getting this first chapter down in the first book. and I'm breaking through some of the hurdles that I've had after previous attempts at writing this. One of the problems is naming these characters. Every single one of them, like there's a core half a dozen characters in the first couple of books, and every single one of them, from whether it's their call sign or their legal name, like it's changed numerous times throughout the various iterations of it. But I think I finally settled on all of their legal names, and the most recent one came just last night. There's a female lead who I don't want to give away any twists about her origins and stuff, but she's got a name of a character in a Greek pantheon, and I have reasons for doing that. And I didn't want to go with Diana because that's Wonder Woman, even though it's a warrior's name. I think Artemis was too much of a reach, and so I was looking at lists of various female names from Greek mythology, and I didn't want to go with Aphrodite or Venus or whatever. There were a couple of good ones and passably good ones, but they also have to work with her surname, and they've got to bounce off of other ones really well. The other night, I thought I'd finally settled on Callista. I thought that's suitably modern sounding while still being a name from the lineup, and then they would just call her Callie for short. But then I started running into another problem where this is eventually going to converge with Engines of Liberty. You'll see how when I get there. And Calvin Adler will play a big role in this overlap between Engines and Intrepids. And I didn't want to have any problems with Callie being a main Intrepids character and Calvin being a main Engines character. So I was like, I got to move off of Cal or anything Cal adjacent. So I kept looking through, and finally I found one of the Graces, one of the daughters of Venus, of Aphrodite, was named Thalia, Thalia. And initially I was resistant. I was like, well, in DC, Ra's al Ghul has a daughter named Talia. I was like, who cares? This works perfectly for this character. It bounces well off of her last name, and it's got a connection to something that is really important for a reveal later on. The main character is a guy named Will, but he goes by another name because he's technically, he's named after his father, who's also Will, and so dad goes by Will, the son goes by something else, but his name is William. And then I've settled on pretty much all of the rest of them. So I like how this is coming together, and I even like looking back and seeing the various iterations of this idea over the years and how it all traces back to this book, The Law of Superheroes. It is dense because there's a lot of legalese and legal speak, and that makes it a little bit trickier to read straight through. So I would recommend picking it up and just analyzing it chapter by chapter and seeing the case citations that these lawyers present, because it's a really unique combination then of factual legal analysis and legal entertainment and superhero thinkery. It sits at a nice convergence of all of those things. And I've gotten some good writing ideas from it, and it's just fun to think about this stuff. This is the kind of thing that people make YouTube videos about now, but over a decade ago, these guys wrote a book about it. Over the next couple of days, I've got 2 more videos on deck to do for the October country, and that'll get us through those summaries. And as far as other October books, I've got one that I read today. There was a movie adaptation of it about 15 years ago. I'll get into that in the next video. I realized I've read this book before, and I thought, I'd kind of forgotten about it, and I thought about it this year. I was like, oh yeah, let's finally take a crack at that one. And then I go and look at Goodreads. It's like, oh yeah, I already read it. So I read it again today. I was like, oh yeah, this is why I kind of bailed out of it. It's fine. I would say that it's just a hair under 3 stars, but that's largely because it's aimed at middle school boys, and it's not one of those middle grade young adult type books that transcends that audience and is accessible to 4 quadrants. It's really going to have appeal to boys that are in that mindset, but we'll get more into that tomorrow. So that's what I'm on lately, and it feels good to be writing without hindrances that have hobbled me before, to be unburdened by what has been, if you will. Oh man, I hate the mimetic nature of discourse, whether it's national or online or whatever, because now like somebody can say a single word and you're just annoyed because it's connected to a meme or a slogan like demure. It'll be 50 years before anybody can use demure without it referring to an annoying trend from like 3 weeks ago. It's internet sucks. All right. Thank you for watching that. To help the channel, check out my books on Amazon. Buy one, read it, tell me what you think. For October, I recommend Sleepless Hollow, a fantastic sci-fi romp with guns, ghosts, and gonzo action sequences. You can also subscribe to my Substack, where I do more detailed book reviews and longer-running projects, some of which is paywalled. Drive safe. See you out there.